It's not political at all.
We'll just
Hi there.
live.
Hi. This is the city clerk here. It looks like we're now live on YouTube.
Okay.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you. Just give me one moment, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure that we are fully live and operational, and then we'll get started here. All right, Mr. Mayor, we're ready to proceed if you are.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And just a few little technical difficulties, but we are live streaming now our regular council meeting for May 11th, 2020. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome everybody to the meeting. And with that, I will ask one of my colleagues on council to move to adopt the agenda for this evening.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Roth, for the agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda? I have two, and I'll start. One is Sexual Violence Awareness Month, so I'd like to lead off with that. And then secondly is Spruce Grove Together. I just wanted to give a community update on a council and community initiative on Spruce Grove Together, and I'll do that following the announcement on the Awareness Month. So I would like to add those under council presentations.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, can we please add those to the council
Councillor
statements
statements,
and
yeah.
updates under section 8? Thank you.
That's right. That's exactly what I was just going to say. Whoops, I was going to say we'll add that under 8A and 8B.
Those are friendly amendments.
Anything else from council to add? Nothing. Mr. Farbrother, any changes or additions from administration?
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Nothing to add? Yeah, you look quiet there. Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I will call the question on the motion. Okay, now, Carolyn, on my screen this time, I can't see everybody's vote, so are you able to?
Thank you. Thank you. I will announce that it's been carried.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll rely on you to do that. Okay, thank you very much. Moving forward, could I get a motion, please, for 2A under the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor, that the recommendations contained in the following reports be approved. Item 3A, the April 27th, 2020 regular council meeting minutes. Item 10F, 2020 business improvement area tax bylaw first reading. Item 10G, the 2020 business improvement area tax rate bylaw first reading. Item 11B, 2019 to 2020 council and committee of the whole meeting dates revised. And item 12A, various board and committee meeting minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Acker, everybody okay with any of those? Anything wanted to be withdrawn on that? Seeing none, I will call the question on the motion.
Thank you. That vote has carried.
Okay, I just wanted to make a brief statement here that this meeting is being conducted virtually with council members participating from various locations. And this is to ensure business continuity as we navigate through these unprecedented times. However, the technology that we're using is highly taxed on a local and national level, and therefore the sound and video quality may be impacted, and we ask for and appreciate everybody's patience. So I'll turn that over to the clerk, and she has a statement to make as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I would like to ask council to please ensure that your microphone is muted unless you have been called upon the chair to speak. When the chair calls the question on the motion, the chair will first ask which councillors are for the motion, and those councillors will physically raise their hand. The chair will then ask which councillors are against the motion, and those councillors will raise their hand. Once the voting is complete, the chair will indicate the number of councillors for and against, which actually I will do that now as we indicated earlier in the meeting. Members of the public wishing to ask a question of council during public question and answer period will be given the opportunity to do so by emailing their question or calling into the virtual meeting. And those are all the protocol notes that I have this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving forward, we have we don't have any public hearings or council presentations or delegations. So we are going to move to our public question and answer period. And I would refer now to the city clerk in regards to the public question and answer period. First of all, is there anybody that has questions of council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have one individual who is registered to speak this evening.
Okay, and I will ask Councillor Stevenson if she could read the preamble to the public question and answer period if she's able.
Oh, I'm able. I just have to get to the right page now. Sorry, I was not
Putting you
ready
on the
to
spot.
read it. Oh, here it is. I got it. Okay. So members of the public wishing to address council verbally during question and answer period at tonight's meeting were given the opportunity to pre-register with the city clerk's office until 12 p.m. today. Members of the public were also given the opportunity to email a question prior to the meeting and may also submit an emailed question at this time. Public question and answer period is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council. Speakers will not be allowed to discuss items that are before the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board or the Assessment Review Board, or any issue being dealt with in a statutory public hearing. The question and answer period does not involve opinions or formal presentations. Those should be referred to the presentation and delegation section of a future council meeting. Administration will assist members of the public who wish to make a formal presentation. These questions may be answered by council or referred to administration for further investigation. In all cases, you will receive a reply. Those persons wishing to speak during public question and answer period may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Stevenson. Okay, I'll go back to the city clerk and go ahead. This is great.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first participant is Joel Halliday of Brookview Way, Stony Plain, and he is registered to address council verbally. Mr. Halliday, your microphone is now unmuted and you may ask your question.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chair and City Council. I want to thank you for taking the time to allow me to speak this evening. I'm calling in my capacity as the chair of the Friends of the Spruce Grove Public Library regarding a motion this evening to reduce the library funding to the amount that was allocated in 2019, removing an anticipated increase of 3.9% and saving the city of Spruce Grove just under $37,000. Even during the COVID-19 epidemic, we are still seeing high levels of usage at the library, especially in online services, and an uptick in library membership. And the planned 2020 budget increase could be put to good use, continuing to support our residents through these difficult times. The Friends of Spruce Grove Public Library understands completely that these are difficult times for us all and that hard choices do need to be made. We also know that Spruce Grove the Spruce Grove Council wants to continue in their support for our award-winning library. Mr. Chair, through you, we are asking the City of Spruce Grove Council to consider using a portion of the City Council contingency fund to provide the planned 2020 budget increase to the library without increasing property taxes in 2020.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. We will be dealing with that later on in our agenda this evening, but we appreciate the question and you taking the time to register, Joel, and as well for your dedication and commitment to the library as well. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, we just received one more email question in, and I will read it here. This question is from Adam MacArthur of Victor Court, Spruce Grove. It says, good evening. I regret not being able to attend this portion of the meeting live, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to submit a question via email. This question is on behalf of myself and my family in respect to the agenda item that proposes reducing the previously announced funding for the Spruce Grove Public Library for 2020. My family and I are concerned about how this will impact our community. Today, our family donated money to the Spruce Grove Public Library equal to how much we anticipated our municipal property taxes would have increased this year in order to do our part and mitigate these concerns. And I would like to know what most concerns council in respect to the impact that the reduced funding for Spruce Grove Public Library will bring.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of the question. I missed the last 2 sentences, I think.
Yes, sorry. The question was, I would like to know what most concerns council in respect to the impact that the reduced funding for Spruce Grove Public Library will bring.
Well, that's certainly up for consideration and interpretation in regards to the challenges we all face as a city. That is going to take, part of the dialogue that we're going to be discussing this evening. But in regards to concerns in regards to funding, I think we have concerns in regards to funding of not only the library, but of all of our services that we provide, which include FCSS for mental health, our protective services, our fire, ambulance, policing, public works. We have a lot of challenges that we're facing as a city, and we're going to be asking each of our departments this evening to consider how they would best operate and improve the efficiencies of what we're trying to do. We're limited to a lot of challenges, and council is very well aware of a number of issues that we're facing, and we're going to work through all that. And I think the big one is that we're all in this together, and we all have to do our part to mitigate the impact on the citizens of our city, and recognizing the value that each one of these services bring. But I appreciate the questions and comments, and thank you very much. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, no further questions have been received.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for the public question and answer period. It's an opportunity for the public to be able to reach out and have the opportunity to connect with us. And so with that, I will go on to 8, which is councillor statements and updates. And I will start with 8A, and I've asked to bring some awareness this evening to Sexual Violence Awareness Month. And so I'll start with, in Alberta, I wanted to say that the month of May is Sexual Violence Awareness Month. And as a city, we are committed to ending sexual violence in our city. At the end of January, the Association of Alberta Sexual Assault Services released a summary and have a lot of work to do, and a lot of education is needed. And we have to recognize they have neighbors and friends who experience a violent sexual assault or even childhood sexual abuse. It's on all of us to end sexual violence here, and it starts with recognizing it is an issue and with committing to the belief that each of us has the right to live free from sexual violence. With COVID-19 keeping us at home, we have fellow residents here in Spruce Grove that aren't in a safe situation. They will experience abuse or sexual violence in their own home. And like the government of Alberta states in their commitment, we support the following. We stand firmly with survivors, advocates, and community agencies to stop sexual violence in all its forms. We commit to supporting survivors, improving our response, and shifting our culture of consent by advancing gender equality. And we work until all survivors are believed and supported, and all sexual violence is eradicated from our communities. Everyone has a part to play in preventing sexual harassment, abuse, and assault. Please call 911 if you witness sexual violence or you see someone who is in immediate danger. If you suspect a youth or child of being abused or sexually exploited, you have a legal responsibility to report it. Call the RCMP or Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-387-KIDS. That would be 1-800-387-5437. and visit the Government of Alberta website to read their commitment to end sexual violence. They have an in-depth site full of resources, contacts, and what all of us can do to ensure we end childhood sexual abuse and sexual violence forever. And I just wanted to bring that up and appreciate the other mayors in the region are committing to recognizing Sexual Violence Awareness Month. And I'll open up the floor to my colleagues on council if they have any questions or comments. Seeing none, I'd just like to, Councillor Stevenson, go ahead.
I just want to reiterate and thank you for bringing this forward this evening. I think it's really important that as a city, we are doing our parts, and especially during this time when we do know, like you said in the preamble, that we have people in very scary situations right now, that they're in unsafe homes and they're possibly experiencing some type of sexual violence. So I think it's upon all of us to recognize that this is happening and do what we can. So I'm very happy as a city that we've put this forward and we are recognizing this in our community. So thank you, Mayor, for bringing this statement forward this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Use your Toadsma, because I can only see 3 other councillors on there. So if anybody else would like to speak, go ahead. And seeing none, I'd just like to move my statement and report for information. So with that, I'll call the question on the motion to receive my report for information. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to go on to 8B, and just wanted to give an update on what we call hashtag Spruce Grove Together. And I wanted to take the opportunity to, first of all, sincerely thank our Spruce Grove City Council, members of the business community, and a number of very community-minded citizens for getting on board with our council this weekend to launch an All in This Together campaign about Spruce Grove, where we are looking to raise our community spirit and pride, and also show a sign of national unity with Canada as we work together in our community to recognizing the challenges we're facing with COVID-19. And I have to say that there was many times throughout the process, I was very emotional about the fact of having all of the Canadian flags throughout the city, but more than that, having all of our provincial flags and our territorial flags on display at Jubilee Park. And we really wanted to, show a sign of unity for our city council. And I just wanted to, again, reiterate how proud I am of that group. We are asking our citizens to reach out and be a part of this. And we'd like to ask you to reach out to our friends in business in our community. Wilhauk Beef Jerky has some incredible deluxe flag poles for sale. For $35, you can stop down at Wilhauk Beef Jerky, and $10 of that goes to a charity in the community to be determined. And Councillor Wayne Roth has some incredibly beautiful 27 by 54 Canadian flags. We would love to see even more of those mounted on the collector roads and in your yards and in the community throughout Spruce Grove. So we have a number of flags, and we're asking everybody to step up and be a part of our Spruce Grove Together, recognizing the impacts of COVID-19 right across Canada. So anyway, thanks again to council and to many community-minded citizens for all the work that they did and for the work that we did in launching that this weekend. So take a drive down and take a look at Jubilee Park. Bring your kids down. I challenge you all to have your kids recognize each one of those flags. And I've got my grandchildren working on it as well, and they seem to think they know them all, so we'll see. But anyway, thanks again, everyone, for participating. And with that, I'll open up the floor if there's any comments from council. Seeing none, I'll just like to move my report for information and thank everyone again. With that, I'll call the question on the motion to accept for information. Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Gray, has that been carried?
It has, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I wasn't sure if you could see yet. My
No, I can't.
apologies.
No, I can only see three counselors at the moment. But, if I go over here, I'm going to see if I can.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, at the top right-hand corner, you can select the speaker view. And change it to gallery view.
Gallery view. There we go.
There you go.
Perfect.
Thank you.
That's better. All right, that works a lot better. Okay, moving forward, under 9A, let's move to Mr. Farbrother. Mr. Farbrother, COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As of this evening, there's one active COVID case in Spruce Grove and 7 people have recovered. So that's good news. The city's emergency management agency continues to meet on a regular basis and monitor the various protocols and strategies to work our way through COVID-19. We do this in liaison with the province. And as council is aware and the public is aware, there is going to be some easing of restrictions over the next few weeks. And Spruce Grove will look to be in line with those adjustments to the expectations of the public. What that means is that there will be more businesses open in Spruce Grove, but more formalized activities where individuals are coming together to play an organized sporting activity. Those will not be changing in terms of the city's requirement that those not take place. As council is fully aware, there's a very thin balancing act between public interaction and COVID. COVID doesn't just go away, it just sits around until it touches the next person. And so unfortunately, we have to continue to maximize social distancing as much as we can. In terms of updates from the last council meeting, with the relaxation in terms of the number of businesses that are able to do business in Spruce Grove, which is a good thing, those businesses will be able to put up some temporary signage to help advertise the fact that they are opening again. And that opportunity has been extended to August 30th at the moment. And the city will be actively engaged in promoting shop local in terms of the use of billboards, etc. Just to continue to reinforce to our public who probably use Google as their first choice of knowledge, but these are other avenues where they can find out if a business is open and when it is open. In terms of human resources, and I know you are discussing a little bit on budgets later. Last week we did lay off an additional 8 people from the city of Spruce Grove. 6 of those were temporary and 2 permanent. And we did reassign 17 members of staff from certain areas of the organization to other areas. So to maximize their capabilities, but also to respond to increasing demands in certain areas of the city. And so where the reassignments came from were basically cultural services, recreational services, planning and development, and integrated planning and strategic services. And they were reassigned into information services, corporate services, enforcement services, emergency social services, communications and community and social development. At the same time, with these layoffs, as council is aware, we had previously had 23 other layoffs and 4 part-time positions for 27. And then we are not currently hiring another 71 summer-based positions. So in terms of human resources available to the city, over the next number of months, we're basically down about 100 positions. And we've also instituted, as you're aware, a hiring freeze that has generated another 8 positions as of this evening's presentation. The reason we have done that is that the city has to find over $2.5 million in 2020 just to balance the budget, assuming that the vast majority of people and businesses pay their taxes in September. In terms of public interaction, we continue to try and keep as many of the services as we can open, but there are a few that, just because of the nature of the service and the risk involved, have to continue to remain closed. And as you're aware, playgrounds, sports facilities, and a number of other areas remain closed. Since the last meeting, we have made the decision to cancel the free cycle recycling event, simply because people are bringing stuff from all over the city, which is then being transferred to other people. So obviously that is a high risk profile to it. We will continue with the city's large pickup, as we normally do in June. Shred for free and e-compost will be postponed till September the 12th. So just keep your stuff and then you'll be able to deal with it in September. And we are still evaluating whether the rain barrel sale will proceed, and we're reviewing that in concert with Stony Plain and Parkland. With respect to Canada Day, we're exploring options, but certainly large public gatherings on Canada Day will not occur. And we have continued to expand virtual programs for youth to help them stay connected. With respect to continuing communications, we'd encourage the public to go on the website. All the various resources, federally, provincially, and municipally, are available there. As the weather warms up, please respect social distancing. It is really important, and it remains important to continue to wash your hands on a regular basis. And then the other piece that we're continuing to promote is be aware that isolation and changing personal circumstances can often lead to challenges within a home environment, and there are health supports available to you, so please access those and get the help if you need that help. And then we are continuing to, through our bylaw enforcement, to continue to educate the public around the importance of staying safe. That concludes my update for this evening, unless there are any questions of council.
Okay, Councillor Grilke, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Fairbrother. Of course, my question is about the temporary signage that is going to be extended until August 30th. How are we going to be letting our businesses that are going to be able to be open know that this is happening? How are we promoting that or letting them know?
Well, we will certainly let them know through our economic development department, through the Chamber of Commerce, and certainly with posts on the website. And I'm sure, Councillor Grilke, you will help us in that regard.
Of course I will.
Various social networks. So the main thing is that these are intended to re-engage in. Often the public will go past the location, and if everything stays the same, then they think the status quo is there. The fact that they'll notice that these signs are out will just help businesses to advertise the fact that they're back in business.
I agree. Thank you for that. One of the suggestions that I had through a social media post was that the city should maintain a list of open businesses. And to me, the natural place that should happen would be the Chamber of Commerce. But I don't know, I'd reached out to them to see if that was something that they were going to be able to accomplish. I don't know if that's something that we can accomplish in a short time, that city businesses that are open or able to be open, that we could post somewhere.
Well, our understanding is there is an initiative of the chamber to do that, and there is a sort of an open link site that you can go onto. So rather than sort of duplicating effort, we would be focusing to direct people to those websites. The other thing is just simply as a business, it's pretty easy to get to update your own profile on Google as well. And in today's world, those are the kind of sites that people go to when they just want to know are you open or not open.
I just thought it might be a little bit of goodwill to show Spruce Grove businesses if it's something that we can accomplish. I would just like to put that out there to administration. So thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Grilke. Any other questions or comments? Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, I just wondered, Mr. Farbrother, if like today you made the announcement that there is one new case. I don't know to what level do we find out, or can we find out as to the backtracking of where the case is coming from? Is it still within our own community that it came from, or is there is it somebody was in Edmonton? Like, I've heard that they have these tracking capabilities and stuff. Do we find out any information on that?
Mr. Wolanski, you've got to answer that one. He's got his hands up. Mr. Wolanski, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So unless there is the Alberta Health Services would contact people who have been in contact and follow those cases, but because of confidential health information, that can't be released, or we can't provide that additional information. We do have some of our emergency personnel may know, but they're not allowed to release that information unless it is directly impacting people that were in close contact.
Perfect, thank you. I wasn't too sure, so just thanks for that clarity.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to administration. As we see the province relax rules and some businesses get back to operations, and we'll probably see additional crowds, do we have a plan in place as a city on how we're going to manage that, or keep our eyes out and monitor any problems that might cause or arise? Do we have anything in place?
So certainly we've added additional individuals to by law enforcement. Our approach will be education first. The city, through the provincial legislation, does have the right to issue tickets, which we'd rather not do. But if 99% of the population is doing the right thing, then we won't have to resort to that kind of action. The main thing is really just to remind people that groups of 15 or less are not permitted. Social distancing is really important, and the physical transfer of COVID is real. The other piece, just I believe the R ratio, which is identifies the risk on it. It's not, the R doesn't relate to risk, but the coefficient in terms of transferring the disease is around a 3. And a 3 is a bit like a geometric progression. It can go up, it's like doing square root or square. It goes up very, very, very quickly. So you can go from 2 to 100 very, very, very quickly. So probably the biggest piece is, our numbers in the Edmonton area in relative terms, certainly on a global context, are very low. It doesn't take much to change those numbers.
Mr. Wolanski.
Thank you. And just to add to that, to Councillor Acker's question about our plan, as Mr. Farbrother said, we would enforce things, but we don't have the ability to, we're not reviewing plans in advance of businesses opening up and saying, does this work or not? I think the province just even today released some significant details and guidelines for people. So our role or plan would be, as Mr. Farbrother stated, more of a after the fact if we receive complaints or concerns expressed versus doing some pre-approval of what their processes may be.
Okay. Mr. Farbrother, I've had a number of requests from businesses that are they fall outside of the the early, what we would call relaxation of the regulations, and they're struggling with business. They're not able to access a lot of the emergency medical or emergency benefits, as well as their particular landlords aren't particularly interested in participating in the emergency benefit provided to businesses. So I guess in regards to where they sit on the spectrum of allowing to be open, I think a lot of them are fitness centers and personal fitness groups and stuff like that. Do we recommend that we stick to the Alberta Health Services guideline, or do we as a city lobby in any way to support them? Because I have been asked by a number of businesses to reach out and see what they can do, because they are, they're in financial difficulty right now, and I just wanted to ask your opinion.
Well, certainly, a number of businesses have been significantly challenged by, COVID-19. As a city, we are not, or have not taken the position that as a city, we are arbitrarily determining which businesses should be open and which businesses should remain closed. The city's position is to basically, respect the decision of the province and the provincial chief medical officer. We wouldn't actually, we would have to declare a state of local emergency, and then under that state of local emergency, we would then have to specifically identify businesses that under provincial regulation, we potentially would allow to be open. So that would be a very difficult and very unusual situation. My sense is the province is very, very aware of the desire for businesses to be open. I'm sure the province would like every single business to be open right now. But certain businesses do inevitably have higher risk profiles. And when people share different equipment, that obviously moves into that high risk profile situation. So everybody wants to be open. But the risks are there. South Korea was COVID free for a number of weeks and just had one individual go into 5 or 6 bars in Korea, and suddenly they got X number of cases. So there's nothing we can actually say that can say we empathize with the situation. But it would be pretty unusual for the city to arbitrarily try to legislate what businesses should be open and which should not, in a sense, in contradiction with the province.
So relative to the recommendations from Alberta Health Services, we're virtually, as a city, sticking to their guidelines and letting them determine the best approaches to reflect the government.
They are privy to information that we're not privy to. They are the experts in their field. They also represent, the elected party for the province, and so they're probably ultimately in a better position to make that call than us. Just in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to have somebody make a motion to accept Mr. Farbrother's report for information. Councillor Oldham?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, moved by Councillor Oldham to accept Mr. Farbrothers' report for information. With that, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Okay. Thank you very much. That's been carried. Okay, moving forward, we're going to get into some bylaws this evening. And I'd like to start off with our, under the property tax and supplementary assessments, could we get a motion, please, for second reading under 10A? Councillor Acker? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that second reading be given to bylaw C-1116-20 2020 property tax and supplementary property tax rate bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Acker. Mrs. Frostad, are you going to be leading us through that one? Can't
Yes,
hear you.
Mayor.
Okay, there we go. There we go.
So you have before you this evening the property tax bylaw that is in line with the 0% tax increase and the budget changes that council approved on April 14th. And I can entertain any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Frostad. So the property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw second reading, that's before council. This was introduced at our last meeting and relates to the supplementary properties coming online during the taxation year, correct?
Mr. Mayor, this is the tax rate bylaw, so it's for all properties, including the supplementaries.
Okay. And anything further on that?
No, Mr. Mayor.
On your presentation?
No, thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Stevenson.
Great, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Frostad, can you please explain the split rate and what the 25% means? I think that's where people get a little confused on what that means, the split rate.
Having a little trouble hearing you, Councillor.
Of course we are now. Okay, I'll just wait.
No, that's better. I can hear you now. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, weird. Can you explain the split rate and what the split rate means in terms of the 25%?
Mrs. Frostad?
Mr. Mayor, I didn't hear the entire question, but I think what was asked is that we explain the split rate between the residential and non-residential. Is that correct? Okay. So we have a property tax distribution policy that currently asks us to compare last year's non-residential rates within the greater Edmonton area. And we take an average of those and we compare that to our actual calculated rate that we would have had to collect our non-residential. Whichever one is higher is the one that is used. So we are using this year the 1.3776. So what that means is that our non-residential rate is 1.3776 times higher than the residential rate. The split in the actual property assessment is 82% residential and 18% non-residential. So how this turns out with the split rate is that the 82% residential is actually taxed 78%, and the 18% non-residential is taxed 22%. So it does allow for premium taxation on the non-residential piece because those taxpayers can also claim these expenses for taxes, whereas the residential homeowner cannot claim their property taxes prior to paying their own income tax. So that's what the split is currently under your current distribution policy.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Stevenson, do you still have the floor? Do you anything else? That's it?
No, that's great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion for second reading. Okay, that's been carried. Can I get a motion, please, for third reading?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move third reading to bylaw C 111620, 2020 property tax and supplementary property tax rate bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Roth, since you made the motion, did you want to speak to it?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I have one question, Mrs. Frostad. When I look at the non-residential rate, I think the rate this year was is 1.3776, and last year was 1.418. So does that mean that the business community in our community is getting taxed at a lower rate this year than they did last year?
Mr. Mayor, the number that you were just quoting there is the actual split. The rate itself, I believe, went from 8.73 to 8.71, something like that. So
okay,
it may have gone down just slightly. I'd have to confirm that for sure, but it's a very minimal change because we had very small amount of growth in the non-residential section of the community.
Yeah, I just noticed the difference in the split mill rate was a little bit lower, so I was just wondering. I mean, it's a small number, but it's still a number.
Yes, very small. Yeah.
Okay, and I think are there any questions or comments in regards to third reading? I just wanted to take the opportunity on behalf of council and I think all the citizens of our city to our administration who worked very hard for about 2 months on looking at the budget implications of the COVID-19 pandemic that we were facing and recognizing that we all looked at reducing and minimizing the impact to our citizens this year. And with that, we have come forward this evening with this bylaw to have a 0% tax increase for 2020. That comes out with a $1.6 million reduction in funds to the city. And these are some of the challenges that we're facing in regards to all of our business models that we deal with right across the community on service levels and ability for us to fund those to a somewhat higher level than we did in 2019. But I wanted to take the opportunity to thank administration for that. I'm hoping the community will embrace the fact of the hard work that's gone on behind the scenes. There's a number of other municipalities in the Edmonton Metro region that have come in with a 0% tax increase this year to recognize the impact and minimize that on our citizens. So just on behalf of all of us, Mr. Farbrother, to you, your staff, and all the GMs and everybody in staff that have worked on tightening up the belt, we appreciate it. And I know there's more work to do on that. So we'll move forward with that. And thanks again. So with that, I will call the question on the motion for third reading for the new tax assessment for 2020. Call the question on the motion. Okay, thank you very much. That's been carried. Okay, moving on. Let's go to 10B. Could I get a motion, please, for our operating line of credit borrowing bylaw?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Mr. Mayor, I'll move that second reading be given to bylaw C-1118-20 operating line of credit borrowing bylaw amendment. And then I have a question, if I may.
Okay, thank you very much for the motion, Mrs. Bogie. We have, because of the deferral of our tax deferrals and impacts to utilities, etc., City Council is looking to borrow, with the recommendation from the administration, $30 million as an operating line of credit. Can you bring us up to speed about what that means and what that really is, or is that Mrs. Frostad will be handling that?
Mr. Mayor, I believe I'm supposed to handle this one. So yes, because we may experience a delay in our cash deposits in the year, we have allowed for additional borrowing if we need it. These funds will only be accessed if the cash flow requires them. So this will be in place as soon as the bylaw is passed, but will not be accessed unless funds are needed to carry on the operations of the city.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Councillor Gilkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question kind of came up in my mind when Mr. Farbrother was giving his update. What happens if we have a number of businesses that close that are unable to reopen, that are obviously taxpayers? What happens to that tax dollar? Does it stay with the property? How does that work, just for my own mind? And then obviously that will affect our ability to provide product and service, and may challenge us to go into this line of credit borrowing. So I was just curious how that would work. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but how would that work?
So there's two pieces here. The line of credit is to cover off the cash flow for the period when we would have the city operating from June to September. If in September, businesses, for example, if a number of businesses, for example, didn't pay the taxes, then the city would have a shortfall from that. The consequence of that actually would then play out over the next number of years, because ultimately the city would be able to recover those taxes on the assets that are held by business. So it's not so much a business that is paying a lease, it's a lease that the city not fully serve. So where the city has huge risk, and hopefully this doesn't play out, is a number of years business failure that ultimately is not recoverable through the court, through the normal legislation that the city has. The short-term impact would be that we just wouldn't have that money. So if there was a large default of businesses, then the city would be using up that line of credit, and then would have to use taxes collected from other taxpayers to pay the interest payments. And so you get into a sort of a bad downward spiral situation. And so that's why I would actually encourage, if you can't pay your taxes in June, you are actually, not only you're helping yourself because the bill is now paid, but you're helping the rest of the city as well, because then there's not a cost of borrowing, because ultimately that comes back to the taxpayer anyway. There's no free lunch. So it would be a long drawn out, declining revenue stream for the city, which would impact probably tax rates potentially in 21, 22, 23, going forward. The immediate impact is that we do have some contingencies that we've already identified in our budget processes that go beyond 0% if we had to go there. The reality is, if we go there, they will have a direct impact on what citizens actually receive. And so what we're trying to do is, continue to balance things out, so the services that citizens are used to getting, we continue as much as possible. The revenues that we've lost, we mitigate as much as possible, and we control our costs as we go along.
Okay. So thank you. That answers my question, because in a roundabout way, it does apply to this, but not necessarily. So I don't have a problem with just speaking to the motion. I don't have a problem. I know that we need to do this in these times in order to carry on our cash flow. So I appreciate your answering of the question and kind of tying it back to this. So thank you.
I can just add as well that we will be continually monitoring the effect of the payments that come in and so on, and keeping council apprised of where we are at with this borrowing as well. So you'll be well informed along the way.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to add on to Mr. Farbrother's comments about the for those citizens that have the ability to pay, that are paying on a monthly basis and can pay, how important it is for us as a city to ask them to continue to do so, because that will really help us as a city to manage our cash flows, and it will not require us to dip into a line of credit that we would have to pay interest on. And there's significant costs to that. So recognizing that, that we're all in this together, is that we see what we can do to, to pay our bills on time where possible. And those that do need help, we are there for you to assist you through that as well. So it's both sides that we're working with. For those that have the ability to, please do. And those that don't, we're here to help you through these tough times. But thank you very much for the questions. Are any other questions or comments in regards to the line of credit borrowing? Councillor Oldham, did you? No? Okay, thank you very much. I'll call the question on the motion. Those in favor? It's been carried. Thank you. Could I get a motion for first reading, please, under virtual procedures, under 10C?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, don't we have to do third reading for the line of credit?
We do. Very good. I'm sorry, I thought that was for first reading. That was second reading. Could I get a motion, please, for third reading under the operating line of credit? Councillor McKenzie?
Sure, I'll move that third reading be given to bylaw C 1118-20 operating line of credit borrowing bylaw amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. This was we just discussed this. Thank you very much, Councillor Grillke, for picking up with that. Appreciate it. And this is for third reading. Any questions or comments in regards to third reading on the borrowing bylaw? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion. Okay, it's been carried. Okay, let's go to 10C. Could I get a motion, please, for introduction on first reading on virtual procedures? Councillor Stevenson?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion that first reading be given to C-1120-20 virtual procedures COVID-19 suppression bylaw.
Thank you very much. This is for introduction for first reading, so I'll call the question on the motion for first reading. My virtual hand disappears once in a while. Okay, that's been carried. Could I get a motion, please, for second reading? Councillor Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that second reading be given to bylaw C-1120-20 virtual procedures COVID-19 suppression bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. And that will be Mrs. Bogie, our city clerk, will be speaking to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Bogie actually just deferred it over to me via message, so I'm happy to present to Mayor and Council this evening on the virtual procedures COVID-19 suppression bylaw. So this bylaw before you this evening aims to bring clarity around the procedures for public hearings and subdivision and development appeal board hearings, which will be conducted virtually for the foreseeable future. This bylaw also enables the mayor to sign key documents for the municipality using an electronic signature. So with that, I'll just review a few of the specifics for council here. So for public hearings, written submissions will be accepted until noon on Wednesday prior to the public hearing. All written submissions will be included in the agenda package. And this is for transparency for the other participants and also to ensure adequate time for council to review the submissions in advance. Persons who wish to submit a verbal submission at the hearing must register with the city clerk's office by noon the day of the public hearing. And this is primarily just to ensure that we are getting all the information to them so that they can call into our meeting. The subdivision and development appeal board hearings have similar requirements whereby written submissions must be provided to the city clerk 1 week prior to the hearing. And those wishing to participate in the hearing verbally must register no later than noon the day of the hearing. The proposed bylaw also includes a provision which enables the mayor to sign council meeting minutes, bylaws, agreements, and checks by electronic signature. And this is simply to further align with the administrative processes with the recommended social distancing practices that are coming down from the province. So the procedures set out in this bylaw will replace any that are prescribed by our council procedure bylaw and the subdivision and development appeal board bylaw while this bylaw is in effect. We are asking that council give all 3 readings of this bylaw so that the procedures are set and advertised in advance of our scheduled public hearings on May 25th. This bylaw will come into force once it's been given 3 readings and is duly signed. And it will automatically repeal when the Government of Alberta's meeting procedures COVID-19 suppression regulation is no longer in force. So this concludes administrative presentation. Mr. Mayor, I'm available to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, and thank you for fast tracking this. I know there was a requirement for us to ensure that that we got this handled in regards to the process that we're using. And with that, I'll open up the floor to my colleagues on council for any questions or comments. Does anybody have any? Councillor Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for presenting this. I think it's great. I do have one question, and I wonder what kind of effort would be required to kind of align with our public question and answer, where during a public hearing, if an email comes in that, you know, yourself as the city clerk could read out that question during the public hearing, just to allow for those last minute, questions that someone might have on a given issue. I know what happens when we're in person, people can stand up and ask the questions, and I'd hate to restrict that ability, or at least I'd like to understand if there's a huge effort involved in being able to accommodate that.
Thank you, Councillor Acker. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The primary concern, we did have lots of discussions around this option and opportunity. The primary concern is media that may be sent to us by email and how we would present that media to council during the public hearing. And also the fact that we could easily get a 12-page submission by way of email. So we thought for the purposes of efficiency, we would recommend a registration requirement. It is certainly council's prerogative if they would like to open it up to have emails submitted during the meeting. What that would mean would potentially be we would have to temporarily adjourn during the public hearing so that council can review the material.
Yeah, just further to that, my expectation would be those emails would be in lieu of a public, spoken question. And that if someone was submitting a document or a brief, that would fall under the written submission rules, which is the Wednesday before. And that as the clerk, maybe we have some rules that, sorry, that is above and beyond just a question during the public hearing. Because to me, those are 2 separate things, where this email should just be taken in light of not being able to be physically present to speak your question. But yeah, I wouldn't agree to be accepting 12-page briefs on a public hearing during the time we're actually taking the public hearing. But that would be my comments and concern.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Acker. Any other questions or comments? It raises a valid point in regards to people that would be involved in listening at a public hearing where something may have flagged or a question may have popped up or something like that, but something for consideration to work through that process for sure. Councillor Grilke, go ahead.
Yeah, I would actually kind of echo those sentiments of Councillor Acker, just because even, for example, tonight's public question and answer, I thought Ms. Gray, in the preamble you had said submissions received by noon, but then you read, I thought, Adam MacArthur's email on the fly. So I'm okay with that. And I would agree that if it's a written submission, it's different than, I guess, a couple of sentence questions. So I'd be okay, or I'd be open to looking at a little bit more on the fly for in-person quote unquote questions, especially since this is supposed to be kind of a quick exchange of information and we're supposed to be pivoting and getting more efficient. So I'd be open to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grilke. Councillor Oldham?
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to Ms. Gray. Question on the repeal. It says the bylaw is repealed when the meeting procedures regulation, Alberta regulation, is no longer in force. When that isn't in force anymore, do we have, my question is, do we have any authority as a municipality to determine when we would go back into council chambers, or is that strictly done by repeal of the Alberta regulation? And I know it's impossible to suggest, but with the business timelines and the different stages coming out last week, do you have a sense of where a public meeting in council chambers fits into those parameters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to you, Councillor Oldham. It's my understanding that we will have some significant challenges just with administration alone in maintaining social distancing within council chambers. We do have the authority to determine when we're going back at this point. However, once that meeting regulation is repealed by the province, then we no longer have the ability to conduct our meetings virtually. So obviously the situation's kind of got a few plates or in motion. So we'll kind of have to stay tuned and see where the chips fall here.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question on the
quick.
Yes.
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor. So just for a quick clarification, if we are looking at changing the bylaw here, we will have to do it here now on the spot if we're going to give third reading here shortly. So I just would like to get a sense from all of council here if it is the desire to have email submissions received during the public hearing.
Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, I'll just speak to that. I do feel that a public hearing is different than the public and question answer period. I do think public hearing, they're advertised, people truly know and can prepare themselves. So, you know, I'm okay with not having it at the last minute. I understand and completely respect Councillor Zacker's thoughts on that, but I'm okay either way, but I'm definitely okay not changing it and leaving it as is.
So you're okay not changing it? Is that what you're saying? Councillor Oldham.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, I support Councillor Acker and Councillor Grilke's spot on this. When I think about how can we make this most like our meetings in council chambers, I think about residents that may come just to listen and be part of it, and then they hear someone say something and they all of a sudden, you know, get up and speak in a public hearing. And you can register in advance, but I know sometimes they'll be inspired by another speaker or they'll have a counterpoint. And I think if we can make this the most like council chambers, given the circumstances that we can, I think it's worthwhile. I understand it creates some challenges perhaps, and on timing of things. I trust that this goes live in the moment and people can see it in the moment, because if not, that could be, you know, someone sends an email and we finished 2 minutes ago. So I understand that there could be challenges, but I think those challenges are worth tackling for the sake of making our meetings as much like council chambers as is possible for this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Stevenson.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And sorry if I sound like I'm talking in a vacuum. I don't know what's going on with my mic this evening. I just want to support the changes as well that Councillor Acker has proposed along with Councillor Grilke. The only thing I think we have to reiterate is that, you know, this isn't a way to get around the representation. Like if you are representing a group of people, make sure that it is one email and not 50 emails, doing the ask and answer type of deal. So I am in favor of it as long as we are clear that it works very, very similar to the public hearing, where we want to limit how many people are speaking if it is from the same group of individuals or companies or associations that you're representing. So, but I'd be in favor of making that change.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Stevenson. That is in our in the proposed bylaws, so we are covered on that end. So with that, I've heard that there is a majority that are interested. So Mr. Mayor, I would like to request a 5-minute recess while I can draft up that bylaw.
Okay, we'll just break for a 5-minute recess. You can go up and refresh your drinks or whatever, but just I'd like to at this time to allow our staff to recraft the bylaw. I'd like to call a 5-minute recess. Don't have a gavel to pound, so bang.
Mr. Mayor, our office is ready when you're ready to reconvene the meeting. We have an amending motion prepared that we will share on the screen.
Okay, thank you very much. We're waiting to see it.
So we do have an amending motion here that I believe reflects the requests of Councillor Acker. As you can see, it's being amended on the fly right now by our Deputy City Clerk. But essentially, we just need a motion to request a new subsection 4.3. Members of the public wishing to ask a question of or make a statement to council during the public hearing may do so by sending an email to the City Clerk's office before the public hearing is closed. And then, of course, the minor clerical thing of just renumbering the subsequent sections.
Okay, thank you very much. So we do have a motion on the floor, and this is an amending motion under second reading. So if I could get one of the members of council to read the amending motion in its entirety for the record, and then we will we'll vote on the amendment. Councillor Acker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd move an amendment that bylaw C-1120-2.
Point of order.
Yes.
The second reading motion was made by Councillor Acker, so we do need someone else to amend the motion. I apologize, Councillor.
I did.
Okay. Who else would we like to do that? Councillor McKenzie, go ahead.
Sure. I'll move that bylaw C-112020, virtual procedures, COVID-19, that's misspelled wrong. COVID-19 suspension be amended to add a new section 4.3, stating 4.3, members of the public wishing to ask a question of or make a statement to council during the public hearing may do so by sending an email to the city clerk's office before the public hearing is closed. And then the second is to renumber all subsequent sections accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much for the amendment. Councillor Acker, is that a friendly amendment?
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor, we do have to vote on that motion.
Is it, we just have to straight vote on it? Okay.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, so we have an amending motion. Does anybody wish to speak to the amending motion? Councillor Acker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support this amendment and just hope that administration, as they're receiving it, will follow the same kind of guidelines. If the question is longer than the time permitted in a public hearing, that, you know, you would make that call and saying that's inappropriate for submission during the email. So is that how that's going to be handled?
We will do our best. We might have to flip it to legal to verify. The one thing that I would recommend is if we do get a lengthy submission, we'll kind of use our judgment on it, and perhaps we might have to still accept it depending on the relation to the public hearing, I guess, who is submitting it. We may need to temporarily adjourn so council can review it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? I just would just add onto the intention of the amendment certainly is to do our best to be as open and transparent as we can to give people the opportunity to talk. And I think a couple of councillors made a very good point of, you know, things when they're watching a public hearing that, oh, I just remember that question, that also reflects on that. So I think it's a good amendment, and it allows us to you know, while we may have to roll on the fly a little bit with it, I think the opportunity for the public to be heard is important, and we certainly don't want to be in a position of being accused of doing something that would ram something through without having, you know, everybody have an opportunity to input. So I'm certainly supporting the amendment. Any other questions, Councillor Roth? Did you wish to speak?
I would. The defining criteria for me on this one is what can we do to make this as closely aligning with what happens in a meeting when we're actually physically in council chambers. And I think with this amendment, this will achieve that. And I think that gives any member of the public who wants to say something during the public hearing to get up, not really get up, but to speak up and have a say on an issue that is important to them, just as they would if we were all in council chambers. So I'm supportive.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Roth. Any other questions? Okay, so we are voting on the amendment to start. So let's, I will call the question on the motion to amend. And that's been carried. Thank you very much. Now back to the original motion. This is still under second reading. If I defer back to the city clerk to be sure that this is on second reading. There's no other further questions or comments in regards to second reading. I will call the question on the motion for second reading. Okay, and now just before we go on to third reading, I'm going to ask Councillor Roth to make a motion.
How did you know, Mr. Mayor? I'll move consent be given to consent be given for consideration of third reading of C112020 virtual procedures COVID-19 suppression bylaw.
Okay, and just to clarify for those watching, Councillor Roth has made a motion for consent because when you bring a bylaw to council for all three readings, in order for it to be brought forward for third reading, all members of council have to be unanimous in allowing third reading to continue. So what we're going to do now is vote on that consent to bring third reading. So with that, I will call the question on the motion for consent. Okay, that's been carried. Perfect. It's one of Councillor Roth's favorite things to do, and he hasn't had that for a while, so I knew he was going to be looking forward to it. Okay, could I get a motion, please, for third reading? Councillor Grilke.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that third reading of C-1120-20 virtual procedures COVID-19 suppression bylaw.
Okay, that's for third reading. Thank you very much. I think we don't need anything further on that. So with that, I will call the question on the motion for third reading. Okay, the only one I didn't see vote was Councillor Oldham. Councillor McKenzie, did you vote? Thank you. Okay, that's been carried. Okay, moving forward, we're going on to a land use bylaw amendment for third reading. Could I get a motion under 10D, please? Go ahead. So could I get a motion? Councillor Stevenson, sorry. Councillor Stevenson, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion that third reading be given to bylaw C-1010-17, land use bylaw amendment redistricting Fenwick stage 3.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Lavasier, could you introduce David Toll, who will be our presenter? Oh, hi, David, you're here. Mr. Lavasier, could you introduce Mr. Toll to the public?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening we have Mr. Toll here to present for third reading for Fenwick Stage 3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lavasier. Mr. Toll, welcome to our virtual meeting. I think this is your first virtual presentation to council, and happy to see Fenwick Stage 3 coming on. Can you let us know what that's all about?
It's nice to be here, Mr. Mayor, and using the new technology that is forced on all of us, or we have the opportunity to use now. As you mentioned, this is for third reading of bylaw C-1010-17, Fenwick Stage 3. It is a redistricting to change 0.19 hectares of land from urban reserve to mixed load medium density residential. Should I bring the map up, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
Okay. Is that working?
That works. Thank you.
Okay. So the redistricting area is highlighted with the hatch shading. It's east of Pioneer Road, south of what would be Grove Drive. The bylaw is consistent with the East Pioneer Area Structure Plan as amended. This bylaw, it's been a while. Mr. Mayor, as you said, it's nice to see this one come forward. It has been on the books for council since May 14th, 2018 is when it received first reading. Public hearing and second reading was given on June 11th of 2018. Typically, administration does not bring a redistricting bylaw forward for third reading until a development agreement has been signed. Although the bylaw itself is a typical or standard redistricting, our current situation is not typical for a number of reasons. And I'll go over those quickly here. The first reason is that in the near future, administration will be bringing forward to council changes to the redistricting requirements. And this is being brought forward as requested by the Council UDI Planning Committee or Planning Task Force. The elimination of the development agreement requirement before third reading is one of the proposed changes to help make our redistricting process more developer friendly. The second reason that this is being brought forward is that this bylaw is scheduled to expire on May 13th, 2020, if third reading is not given to the bylaw. That's because each bylaw has a 2-year expiry date. And as I said, this received first reading on May 14th, 2018. As the developer in Fenwick, I guess this is my third point, as the developer in Fenwick is in good financial standing with the city and has provided detailed engineering drawings of this stage of development, administration is coming forward and seeking third reading at this time before the development agreement is entered into to save the bylaw from expiring and forcing the developer to go through with a new bylaw. I think at that time I'll end my presentation, but I'm here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Toll. And I'm sorry on the very, you gave a couple of reasons. The very first reason you gave, I was distracted by a text in regards to an abstention on this one. So could you just reiterate the first reason why this bylaw is coming to us?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. In the near future, administration will be bringing forward changes to the redistricting requirements. And this is in response to the request that was made by the Council UDI Planning Task Force. The elimination of the development agreement requirement before third reading is one of the proposed changes that administration will be bringing forward to council. And it's one of the things that is going to make our process more developer friendly.
Okay, thank you. In regards to this particular bylaw before us, Councillor Acker was not in attendance at the public hearing in regards to this, so he had sent me a note that he's abstaining from this, the third reading on this. But I'll open up the floor to my colleagues on council. Is that everything, Mr. Toll?
Yes, I'm here for questions.
Okay, I'll open up the floor to my colleagues on council if there's any other questions. Councillor Grilke, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Toll, I think I know the answer, but especially because you're alluding that there will be changes coming, but does the city have any risk of doing the third reading before there's a development agreement in place?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only thing that might be seen as a risk is that we kind of lose control of when the development can actually happen. When we enter into a development agreement, we know that there's a sort of a time limit. The clock has started ticking, the developer has paid their fees, and they're going to proceed. Right now, the way that we would proceed with this one is the development agreement would be a condition of subdivision. So it's not that we wouldn't enter into the development agreement, it's just it is deferred until the time of subdivision registration.
Well, and certainly, I mean, COVID-19 notwithstanding, that's not hypothetically if we greenlit this project and let's say the developer was no longer, doesn't that just mean that it's easier for another developer to step in because it's already been kind of greenlit? Is that also true? Or no? I've got a cat behind me. Get down.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the land would be districted, and yes, it would be available for another developer. Like, let's just say that it changed hands. Yes, it would be available for the next developer to come in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for bringing this forward. I was looking at the timeline when I read the report, and I was kind of thinking it was one of those time-sensitive ones, because it was some time ago that third reading had been given. But recognizing the current situation, I just commend administration that it's a good move to not have our developer go through the whole process again through public hearings and everything else. So thank you very much for bringing that forward. I'll call the question on the motion for third reading. Okay, and we have one abstention. Councillor Acker is abstaining, and that carries. Okay, off-site levy bylaw. Let's have a motion, please, for second reading. Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, I'll move that second reading be given to bylaw C111720, off-site levy bylaw as amended.
Okay, thank you very much. That's for second reading. Mr. Lavasier, we have had a lot of work done by our consultants on the levies that we charge and all the work that goes into determining the areas that these offsite levies reflect to and the charges that are associated with those. So go ahead with your presentation, and what does it mean for the city? And what does it mean for the development community? Has it gotten cheaper for them, or has it gotten more expensive?
On average, I don't want to steal Mr. Flynn's thunder, but some of the rates are being proposed to go down.
Yes.
So this evening we have Mr. Flynn, Darren Flynn. He's the supervisor of municipal infrastructure for the city, who will provide the presentation to council.
Mr. Flynn, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, I'm just, as Mr. Lavasier says, I'm going to share with you the update of the 2020 offsite levy rates. I've got a quick presentation to go through. I'm going to share my screen with you right now. And we'll make sure that everyone can see that. Is everyone seeing what I'm seeing here?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll dive right into it. This is the presentation for the offsite levy bylaw update for 2020. We'll go through the new rate development process, development areas and development staging, water, sanitary, and transportation summaries, a summary of our offsite levy reserves, and the 2020 rates that are proposed. The development process for the 2020 offsite levies is as follows. The current bylaw contains information that was established up to December 31st, 2018. The new bylaw will move that forward 1 year to December 31st, 2019. Everything after that is still treated as an estimate. Everything up to December 31st will be actual costs. City staff has reviewed and amended the list of offsite levy projects and updated the estimates and actual costs for transportation, water, and sanitary sewer infrastructure. We've reviewed the development staging assumptions from the previous bylaw, and we've updated that to reflect the development to date and our future growth projections. We then take that information and enter it into our offsite levy model that's been provided by Corvus. In order to do that, we update actual construction costs for 2019. We input all the development levy receipts. We link those receipts to projects. We update construction estimates and add any new projects. We update infrastructure financing and benefiting parties, debenture impacts, development staging and development plan. We update infrastructure allocations, staging, construction price indexes, and oversizing calculations. We reconcile the reserve balances and the staging adjustments, and we generate the offsite levy rates. So you've seen this before. The city is divided into 11 offsite levy areas. All the lands contained within an offsite levy area. The levy areas account for location of infrastructure basins and barriers. All offsite levy infrastructure costs are allocated to at least one of these areas. Development area measurements. The offsite levy rates are based on net development area. So that's basically the gross area, less environmental reserves, less municipal reserves, less arterial road right-of-ways, which gives us a net development area. Net development area within the current boundaries is approximately 959 hectares. And we're projecting through our staging to all of the 959.8 hectares will be developed within the next 25 years. This gets us into a infrastructure summary for water, sanitary, and transportation. That's the 3 items that we include in our offsite levies. There are 4 offsite levy related water infrastructure projects. All work on these projects is complete. Cost of that water infrastructure is about $14 million, and that's down from approximately $16 million in the previous model, and that's just because of lower actual costs. There are 7 offsite levy related sanitary infrastructure projects. Those estimated costs are about $21 million. That's up slightly, and that's just based on West Trunk sanitary construction costs. And we've got 51 offsite levy related transportation infrastructure projects. That's estimated at $125 million. That's down from the previous estimate of almost 134. And again, that's just from updating estimates and inputting actuals for completed projects. This is how we benefit, or we allocate these costs to benefiting parties. So this is the water. We start with a $14.02 million total project cost. We subtract grants and contributions, any oversizing. So projects that fall outside the 25-year window are considered financial oversizing, and we remove those costs from the model. Because the water is complete, we don't need to do that in this case. Other share refers to benefits that might go to other municipalities or areas that are to be annexed in the future. And existing development is just areas that are already within the city that don't benefit, or that might benefit from these offsite levy projects. We then remove the levy receipts, what we've received from development, and it leaves us with a balance of $2.3 million. That $2.3 million forms the basis of the water rate. Same thing for sanitary. Initial project cost of $21.15 million. When we reduce less special grants and contributions, financial oversizing, there's an other share here that's there is some portion of the Pioneer trunk sewer that benefits annexation lands. We remove that cost. When we remove the offsite levy receipts, we're left with a balance of $11.65 million. Same thing for transportation. Start with a project cost of $125 million. When we remove the grants and oversizing and receipts, we're left with a balance of $63.76 million. Here's kind of a snapshot of the sanitary infrastructure projects that are remaining. We've got the Boundary Trunk Sewer and the Pioneer Trunk Sewer extension from McLeod to the CN Rail. Transportation infrastructure, there's about 30 of the 51 projects that are remaining to be completed. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but you can kind of see where they're centered around Pioneer Road, boundary extensions of Tamarack Drive, and upgrades to Campsite and Century Road. These charts, they kind of tell us how we get back to $0. The goal of the offsite levies is to break even between project costs and developer contributions. Water infrastructure is complete, so this chart is a nice smooth curve. As development happens, we collect water offsite levy receipts, and they go to paying down the reserve deficit. Same for sanitary. Sanitary is not as smooth. We've got a couple of projects that are left to complete. So the dips that you see in the chart are areas where we're going to be spending. The rise in the chart is areas where we're collecting offsite levy receipts. Same for transportation. A lot more projects, a lot more dips and dives in this chart. But the goal is to get to $0 again in 25 years. We've got 3 reserve accounts, one for each transportation, or for each type of infrastructure. So water, sanitary, and transportation. Brackets indicate that they're into negative. So we've got minus $2.4 million in our water reserve, negative $8 million in sanitary, and negative 13.7 in transportation. We'll just go through a quick summary. This is all the infrastructure combined, water, transportation, and sanitary. It shows that a total project cost of $160 million for all the projects. But when we remove the grants and contributions, other stakeholders, and dollars outside the 25-year window, we're left with $115.9 million that forms the basis of the developer costs, which brings us to our 2020 rates. We're sitting at a weighted average for 2020 proposed of $84,842. Weighted average for 2019 is $88,730. So that's a reduction of about 4.5% from 2019. Transportation levies have a slight increase, and that's based on staging, year of construction that's projected, updated costs. Water levies are reduced due to projected construction costs were lower than estimates. And sanitary levies in areas 4 and 5 are having a slight increase due to updated boundary cert construction estimates, but the remainder saw a slight reduction. That's it for the presentation. I'm available to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll open up the floor to my colleagues in council if there's any questions or comments in regards to the offsite levy bylaw. Councillor McKenzie.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for your presentation. I always respect offsite levies and I enjoy them, but I'm happy to see our numbers and the weighted average has gone down, and it looks like our sanitary has gone down and our transportation has not gone up that much. My concern is looking at the water levies, and I get that there is always a change within actual versus estimated, but when you estimate out something that you're going to construct in 20 years, for sure there is, it's definitely harder. But because we update these offsite levies every single year, I am concerned that last year when we put these numbers in, the water main 400 mil project number 4 in the offsite levy infrastructure, like we were over double what we were estimating just a year ago. Like we had it at 2.64 million, and now the actuals came in at just 1 million. So it was 1.57 million over projected. And maybe there was a big anomaly as to why that happened, but I just, I struggle. As last year, I feel that we should have been closer in that estimate. And then my second question is, when you look at on the map, sections 8, 10, and 11, they're the ones that were most affected. The rates last year were 18,572, and now they've gone to 4,800. Did we charge any developers in, section 10 and 11, looking at the map, most likely not. But my concern is, did we charge any developers the rate last year? I get offsite levies, you pay the date, you pay the rate of the day, but to have one specific area drop 75%, it's a big concern for me.
And so through you, Mr. Mayor, there was a significant decrease in the water rates this year. Looking back at the 2019 update, there was I believe an estimate that was used that was carried forward that was a little high. The rates that we received on the 400 millimeter water main project were significantly less than the numbers that were anticipated. The estimates are put together by engineering professionals that are using the best numbers that they have at the time, and the numbers that on that project in particular did come in quite a bit lower than we anticipated.
And then just on the other question as to, did we charge developers last year the 18,500?
Yes, again, through you, Mr. Mayor, there was one development that happened last year at just over a hectare of land. So they did pay $18,000 in water offsite levies.
So just out of curiosity, are we concerned about that developer being upset about that?
Through you again, Mr. Mayor, we've had the discussion with that developer. They're not upset. They did raise the question of why the numbers went down as significantly as they did, and we have gone through the numbers with them and explained the difference.
Mr. Mayor, the development industry in Spruce Grove, the vast majority of the players are here for the long term, and rates go up and down on an annual basis, and some years you win and some years you don't win. It probably pretty much evens itself out. It's a bit like dollar cost averaging with investments. It's a good way to play.
Yes, and I mean, I'm very familiar with the levies, and that's what I do like about it, and I do believe, but it just to see that drastic of a change over 1 year was a little bit disheartening. But I get it. Yes, it does happen. So thanks for your answers.
Okay, thanks very much. I guess I have one question to Mr. Flynn in regards to I saw in the report you were talking about the taxation requirements in the new annexation areas. When does that kick in, and when is the annexation finalized, or is it finalized this year, or when is that all finalized? The Parkland annexation.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have the exact numbers when the annexation will be completed, but we will just hold that number until such time that we can apply it to the annexation lands.
Okay, I think Mr. Lavasier has that. Wanted to jump in.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a quick update on the annexation. The annexation application has been submitted to the Municipal Government Board, and we're anticipating a decision some point this year. Now, with the current situation, that could be delayed slightly, but the original intention was to have the annexation complete by January 2021. And so at that point, we would look to incorporate those lands. But as Mr. Flynn is outlining the various projects that are required to get that work completed for the offsites, each of those areas would have to undergo an analysis to determine what road infrastructure, water infrastructure, sanitary infrastructure would be required in order to bring those lands on, and that would be added to the model along with the developable lands.
Okay, and then with that model would be its own new area would become area 13 and 14 or whatever example.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to reflect. I know when you look at the report, sometimes when you look at our reserve balances, but I think one of the things that I would applaud our council for is not being afraid to spend infrastructure dollars to drive development in the community, and that results in part of the cost for a new water reservoir, for the installation of Pioneer Road, and opening up the east end of the city to new development. So hopefully with the work that we've done, that new development will come on stream when things tend to turn around. I just also wanted to say I was happy to see the reanalysis done to see that the offsite levies have come down for our development community. I think that's a good news story in itself. And it positions Spruce Grove very well within the capital region. I know a number of other municipalities whose offsite levies, and I don't want to refer to them by name, but I do know that some of our neighbors have extremely a lot higher levies than we do, and we're hoping to maintain a competitive advantage for that. So appreciate the work going in. Interesting when you look at the long-term capital plan of infrastructure, when you look at a number like $125 million, how that's built out and paid for over time. But we see a lot of that would be happening in the periphery of our current developments, which would be on the west end and the southeast and southwest side of the community. So there's a lot of calculations go in for that. So anyway, thanks very much for the report and the work. And I don't see any other further questions or comments from council. So with that, I would like to call for the motion on second reading for the offsite levy bylaw. Call the question on the motion. Okay, that's been carried. Thank you very much. Could I get a motion for third reading, please? Councillor Oldham.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that third reading be given to bylaw C-1117-20 offsite levy bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Oldham. Are there any other questions or comments in regards to third reading? Seeing none, I'll call a question on the motion. Okay, thank you very much. That's been carried. Mr. Farbrother, I don't know if you were voting or you were scratching your head, but I just wanted to remind you, you can't vote. Okay, thanks. Got to have a little fun, you know. All right, let's go. So we have consent agenda is handled on the 10F and 10G. So let's go under our business items. We'll start under 11A, 2020 budget reallocation COVID-19. This is Bojay. Who are you asking to speak to this one?
I believe Mr. Farbrother was going to touch on this one with the two items.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we've worked through the COVID situation, I believe as council is aware, obviously some very, very significant impacts on the city's budget. Two areas that you're fully aware of is one is your decision as a council to reduce the proposed tax increase from 3.9% to 0, which results in about a $1.6 million reduction in the total tax levy in 2020. And we requested that administration find that money not as one-time money, but as ongoing, because that benefits the taxpayer, not just in 20, but in 21, 22, 23, 24, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were able to provide you with that number. The second thing that we identified was within the operating budget, because we would be closing a number of facilities, we would be operating services and not collecting money, for example, transit. And then we would have ongoing costs of actually managing COVID, but the implications for the city were about $2.5 million. And part of that $2.5 million is covering line of credit charges because of the deferrals and things like tax payments. Those adjustments were provided to council and you have previously approved them. There were three items that didn't go through that process and are in front of you this evening. One is the library, the city not increasing taxes in 2020. The proposed increase to the library would not be taking place. And then the other two items are items that you've initiated yourself in terms of looking at your own council budget and are proposing that salary increase that was recommended by an independent body a number of years ago to council should be put on hold as of May 1. And secondly, that there are some dollars that because of the, our virtual world that we're in today and the reduction in things like travel and conferences, that council are able to sort of mitigate some of that cost through your budget as well. So there are 3 adjustments to the budget that would need to be formally recognized, that would go in with the rest of the money that is being used to actually respond to, a global issue. And we'd be, either through finance or myself, we'd be happy to answer any further questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Farbrother. And I think what I would propose we would do, and just start the conversation, is I would propose that we will deal with each motion individually. And I would start off, first of all, by saying that the recognition of the work that the city has done in regards to COVID-19 are significant, and the significant impacts faced by this city. And I am in very close contact with every municipality, mid-sized cities across the province, recognizing the huge challenges that they're all having. And those challenges are related to lower development, lower permitting costs, reduced revenues, and reducing taxes to their citizens. And with each one of these comes a challenge to the city about how do we balance our resources and how do we best manage to balance and even out where everybody is in this together that we look at. And our council, in fact, I have to commend council members that brought to me a suggestion in regards to our current salaries and the raises that we received from an independent body in January of this year, and recognizing the impact to our staff and to all of those who have had to tighten their belts and make sacrifices in regards to the financial challenges for the city. So we have 3 motions before us this evening. So I would ask one of my council colleagues to start with the very first motion that relates to our salary increase on your agenda. So we could deal with those one by one. I would entertain a motion. Councillor Stephen, or Councillor Oldham.
Okay, Stevenson.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that the 2020 salary increase and cost of living allowance increase for mayor and councillors be suspended effective May 4th, 2020.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Oldham, for the motion. So that means that our council increases that we received in January are going to be effectively suspended on May 4th of this year for the remainder of 2020. Are there any questions or comments in regards to the motion? Councillor Stevenson.
I just want to speak in favor of this motion. I think it's only fair and the right thing to do as we ask other people to tighten their belts and find savings. And we know a lot of city departments are working with less money, and it's heartbreaking to hear that people are losing their jobs at this point in time. So I think this is the least we can do as a council to accept this motion. So I'll be voting in favor of this motion this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments? Councillor McKenzie, please go ahead.
Oops, turned off my video instead of unmuted. I speak totally in favor of this too, and I get it is definitely tightening my belt up a bit, because my actual other daytime thing is owning businesses that are affected with COVID right now. But I think that it is beneficial, and we're showing and leading by example. My only question that I have is, this is for the remainder of 2020. What then happens in 2021? Is it because I believe the current process right now is it was a 3% every single year. So then are we doing a 3% based on this current number or on the old number? just for clarity, because reality is this is not just a 6-month thing that's going away. And so when I read this, I wasn't sure as to then, I kind of assumed that it would be a 3% in January based on what we're reducing it to, but I'm not too sure. So I just want clarity on that.
Well, the current motion before us is for the remainder of effective for the remainder of 2020. And I believe we'll be dealing with any other changes reflective in the corporate plan coming up in November when we have that discussion. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Oldham. And then Councillor Grilke.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll just echo my colleagues' comments and support this motion. I think your initiative this weekend about all in this together, we can speak to that and lead by example a little bit, and so I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grilke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, of course, I'm happy to support this as well. When Mr. Farbrother was giving his update earlier, it was very sobering to hear that, you know, we're equivalent, or we're losing the equivalent of 100 staff up to this point. Could be more, and hopefully things recover in a timely fashion. So as I think Councillor Stevenson said, it's the least we can do. And I'm certain as we go forward, we'll look for other optimizations and other savings that we can provide and do our best to show our support in whatever way we can. So thank you to Councillor Oldham. I know he was trying to kind of be behind the scenes there, but I know we're all in this together, but it was a great idea and I appreciate you bringing it forward. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Okay, thank you for that. That's been carried. Could I get a motion, please, for the second item, which is under the travel and subsistence budget? Councillor Stevenson.
Perfect. I'll make the motion that the 2020 budget for travel and subsistence for mayor and council be reduced by 1/3.
Okay, thank you very much. So what that basically means is that the mayor and council each have a travel and subsistence budget that we use for per diem, for travel to conferences, to representing the city at a variety. Could I get you to mute your mic? There we go, Councillor Roth. Thank you. Have the opportunity to travel and represent the city at different conferences and training things, etc. And the significance of that will be able for us to put a significant amount of dollars immediately at the disposal of the city, which would assist them in managing the day-to-day operations and stuff that we're challenged with. I know that each of us, are somewhat restricted for the amount of work we're doing. So this would be seen as an easy way for us to show our support as well. So I'll certainly be very supportive of reducing those budget costs and putting that directly into our city coffers. Okay, so with that, are there any questions or comments in regards to the expense budgets? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question on the motion for the reduction of 1/3 of our expense budgets for the remainder of the year. Okay, thank you very much. That's been carried. Okay, on the third one, could I get a motion, please, in regards to the funding level of the Spruce Grove Public Library?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion that the 2020 allocation to the Spruce Grove Library remain at the 2019 funding level of $924,467 to align with COVID-19 overall municipal spending.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Roth. Since you made the motion, did you want to speak to it initially, or did you want to defer?
I do. I do. I wasn't actually planning on speaking to this motion, but the two motions that we've just passed make me want to speak to it. Also, the two questions that came up during public question and answer period, both related to library funding level. And so I think it's important that I do speak to it. I feel that there is no time when a library is more important than during tough economic times such as we're in right now. A decrease in funding for the Spruce Grove Public Library of some $36,000, while it may seem like a small amount of money, it is going to be significant to the library's operations. Some cuts will have to be made, some things that have been tossed around. None of this is official, but possibly Sunday closure once the library as a physical entity is open again. Perhaps some staffing changes and some programming changes might be necessary. But I think the overriding thing for me is that, and council is taking a bit of a bite, as evidenced by the two motions that just passed unanimously. Every department of the city has been asked to share the pains as it speaks. So to speak, every resident of the city, I think, is being, or pretty much every resident of the city is being impacted in a financial way, some rather significantly, and businesses are being affected. I think there are many businesses that are being very severely financially stressed, and many residents that are being very financially stressed as well. I can only imagine the pain that some people in our community are accepting right now. So I'm prepared to justify this to the library board when the time comes up, and I'm going to support this motion enthusiastically, because I think that whereas $36,000 is a significant amount of money for a library that operates on a limited shoestring budget, I do think it's important that we are, as has been said earlier in this meeting, we're all in this together. And I think that the library has to find a way to make this work within their budget. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ackert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak on this as well. And in light of the current economic situation we're in, it's only prudent to look at all our departments fairly. And I think this is a tough decision and a tough, cut to a service that I think many find very essential, and it's going to be utilized a lot during, even the reopening and in the social fabric of our community. But the reduction is about $1 per capita when we're looking at the 2019 levels. And it will take some time for the board to look at their finances and find where they need to trim and find out what services are essential for the library and be able to provide them. But I'm confident that the library board will be able to identify those solutions with the funding provided. But I want to make the mention that I believe fundamentally our Spruce Grove Library is underfunded by the other partners within it, including the provincial government and Parkland County. That there needs to be some, discussions taking place with those two funders as well. And Spruce Grove, I know, is the majority funder, but we also need to look at those opportunities and do what we can as a council to lobby and ask for those dollars. I'll support this because in light of all the other cuts and changes we've done corporately, that it's a fair and reasonable approach. But I think that as a council, we can find other ways to, hold up and support the library as they roll out their services.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Mayor. And just a couple questions maybe for administration. I appreciate Mr. Farbrother outlining the greater impacts on the city and all of the difficult choices that have to be made. Has administration, and I know the library is an autonomous board who makes decisions based on funding, and Councillor Roth maybe referred to a little bit. So if he wanted to chime in, or Councillor Ackert being the board members, I'm great with that too. Do we have a sense, or has the library communicated what exact programs or what they may do, or the decisions they may have to make if this funding is reduced back to 2019 levels?
Mr. Wolanski. Mr. Wolanski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Councillor Oldham. Not directly or specifically. Again, that is something that I believe they might be having discussions with their own board, but they haven't indicated to the city exactly what that would be. I believe they are waiting to see the decision first, but haven't provided me with any specific information on that in that regard.
Maybe just to comment, I think it's careful on the terminology here. This is not a cut. This is not a proposed increase. The library's funding in 2020 will be at the same level as it concluded in 2019 if council approves this budget. So there is no cut in dollars to the library. The second piece is that whether it's the TLC, whether it's the library, whether it's the city services, the business model has changed. And so for each organization, there are actual savings associated with that change, and there are costs associated with that change. For the city of Spruce Grove, it was a $2.5 million one-time cost and a $1.6 million ongoing cost. For the library, it would be different, but there is no request to reduce the funding to the library in 2020. Council in November signaled an appetite to increase funding, which if you don't approve in the setting of the mill rate is not there. So I just wanted to clarify that. The other piece, and Mr. Wolanski, we do talk with the library a lot, and we actually do provide some services to the library as part of the, for example, HR support, etc. But it is essentially a requisitioning, a mill rate is set by council. It is an autonomous board. And so as an organization, we're very circumspect in suggesting how the library should conduct its business. What council sets is the dollars, and then the library looks at best practices and the delivery on those, best practices.
Thanks, Mr. Farbrother. That actually leads into one of my other questions. And I don't know if Councillor Roth or Acker may have an idea or be able to get some information, or Mr. Wolanski, but as the last 2 months have gone on, and for sure, a little bit more time as well, there may be some lost revenues that may be found by the library for rentals and other things. But there's also bound to be some fewer expenses, whether, Mr. MacArthur, library chair, sent a letter to the city council indicating they were reducing some hours, not opening on Sundays, not replacing staff, lots of the things, or a few of the things anyway, that we're doing as a city that must realize some savings. I think it'd be worthwhile to understand the implication of COVID to them, and what can be done to understand their financial picture a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think that's a question that can go back to our library board representatives, and I maybe a question that I may be asking on behalf of Councillor Oldham, because I've been invited to a virtual meeting with the library board next week. Mr. Wolanski, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Councillor Oldham. So they have provided a general overview of some of the changes that they've had to make already, which has some cuts to, and I use the word cuts, but changes to the financial picture. So reducing expenses and some of those kinds of things that they have to mitigate some of their costs as well already. But those numbers are based on still hoping for the proposed increase, and so they would have to make further decisions if this motion passed tonight, which that again they haven't provided details on what those would be yet, but they have provided some information as to reduction of expenses and some of those things already that they have undertaken.
And then just a comment maybe to be considered down the road is the concept of reserves. When you look at the financial statement, there's a good chunk of reserve in there, and the definition for when reserves are used is on the bottom of the page for roughly, I'm paraphrasing, for extenuating circumstances. I can't think of more extenuating circumstances than a global pandemic. So just something to consider. We want to work with the library and support them as best we can, but I do support this motion. I think that it has to be literally an all in this together, and it's great to go out and say we're going to give a tax break to our residents and some other deferrals and some mitigations that will help people. But the reality is, on the back end of that, tough decisions have to be made. And I think that it's fair that we spread the challenges out amongst many departments. And although the library is a wonderful service in our community, they can be creative. The firefighters, the police station, FCSS, there's a whole bunch of wonderful services in our community. If we can share that out amongst many people, I think that will serve our residents overall best. So I will support this motion, and we'll cede the floor to any of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oldham, for that comment. Any other questions or comments in regards to this motion? Councillor Grilke, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of the questions were asked and answered. So I think one of the most timely comments was Councillor Acker, who reiterated that the library is underfunded by the other levels of government and the other municipality that supports them. I think we have all shown and all know that the Parkland County levels have actually decreased over the last couple of years, and that the province's levels have stayed the same. So if we're calling ours a decrease, then I would assume we would call the province's a decrease as well. But again, as Mr. Farber said, ours is not a decrease, so we're splitting hairs there. I would feel that if it was, if we were making this decision on one business from the city, whether it was FCSS or the library, we would have to revisit this and maybe, as to Mr. Halliday's suggestion, use some reserves. But because we're trying to, as my other colleagues have said, kind of spread the burden and spread the challenges across all of our business items, that I think that this is it's an unfortunate repercussion, but it's a fair repercussion that all of the city has had to actualize, not just one portion. And so I will support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Stevenson. Thank you very much, Councillor Grilke. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, I'm going to support this motion as well. And, we're in a period of great disruption. For the last few years, we were in disruption, and now more than ever, we've been disrupted by something that is hitting everybody in one way or another. And there are those that are going to adapt and they're going to thrive, and then there's those that are going to refuse and they're not going to go anywhere. But I have full confidence in the library board, and even more confidence in the library staff that we have, that they're up to the challenge. They're very smart individuals. They love everything about our community, and they're going to find ways to be able to deliver the programming and the services that our city wants. We're coming out of this pandemic. We don't know when, but we're not going to be the same community that we were going into it. So the opportunity to innovate right now and to make some changes, whether it's more online, the type of delivery they have, this is the opportunity to do it. Like, everyone pulls up their socks, and it's amazing how people thrive under this type of opportunity. And I hope they see this as an opportunity to innovate a little bit, considering they don't have patrons coming in right now. They still want to deliver services. There's lots of ways to do this, and I really do believe that the board providing that guidance to the staff, but knowing who our staff are at the library and just how amazing they are at delivering different programs to the community, I have full confidence that they're going to be able to make it work. And I know they'll have to go and review some of the programs that they offer, but I really do think that we have probably the best library staff that we could ask for. And I do really have full confidence that they're going to manage through this disruption and be able to come out even stronger going forward. But I will support this motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Roth.
I just want to speak to something that Councillor Stevenson just mentioned, where you talk about having confidence in the staff and the board to find opportunities to innovate. That's already happening. And I'll give you one example, and that is there are some online programs that are being conducted right now with significant success, programs that either, I won't say that they didn't exist before, because the ones that I'm aware of did exist before, but they were conducted physically in the physical library that are now being done online. And I could provide several examples if necessary, but some of these are fully subscribed. And I think that this isn't the board, this is the library staff under the direction of our interim director, who are coming up with ways to make sure that library programming and services are still available. We're just offering them in a different way. So that's already happening, and it will continue to happen out of necessity as much as anything else. But our library staff are doing a fine job. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councillor Acker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to administration. And I know we're just not providing an increase to the requisition this year, but understanding that the city does provide a lot of soft services and assistance to the library in their day-to-day operations to help meet the patrons' needs. Is there an opportunity moving forward for any, ability for the city to assist the library as they look going down the road? Because I know we're going to probably have to look at a library of putting those plexiglass screens in as a facility. Is the city able to provide non-cash supports in other ways that may be available to help support the library?
Mr. Wolanski?
If they were,
our brother?
Hard to tell.
Well, with anything with COVID, obviously there's going to be changes, and we'll continue to work with the library as we do regarding the facility and the other services we provide to see if there's opportunities that we can all have gained some efficiencies for sure.
Okay, thank you. I think that pretty much concludes the comments, and I just wanted to echo some of the comments made by my colleagues on council, and I appreciate the tough position that our board reps are in regards to their fiduciary responsibility to the board, and the fact that they recognize that our entire city is challenged, and I appreciate all the comments and the feedback. I can tell you that I've had numbers of comments from residents and patrons from Stony Plain, Parkland County, and Spruce Grove over the last few weeks in regards to just some communications that went out. But I wanted to assure them, and I'll say this, and I'll say this to anybody, is that we have the best library in the west region of Edmonton, and we are operating at the 2019 levels that we're committing to. And that 2019 level that we're committing to is a very high level of service, in my opinion. And I think that the ability for them to operate with that is something that, the business of COVID has changed. And reflecting on numbers of comments from business today, how business and the way we operate will be very different coming out of COVID-19. But I also want to issue a big caution in regards to what's coming, because we don't know. We don't know the mayors in Alberta. I'm connected with every mid-sized mayor, and they're worried about tax default. They're worried about business. They're worried about our finances. So we need to be sure that when we come out of this, where we are financially. But I think that based on the work and all the staff that we have at the library, I think we're going to be able to get through this. And I appreciate the fact that all of our business models in the city have had to really tighten up. And you know what? I will say to every resident that's listening tonight, and I'm sure there's lots of library folks tonight, you're going to see a very different level of service even throughout our community in regards to what we're able to provide, because we have 100 less staff today than we had a year ago at this time. And that's significant for a city of our size and the service levels that we provide. But we know that we're going to look at working through this together. We're going to ask our board and our board reps on council to work together and understand that how much we value the service the library provides and the importance of it to our community. And we're going to make sure that we do that. And I really hope that they can use some of their efforts to go back to the other partners like Parkland County and the province of Alberta that have actually in some cases reduced funding. But we're going to maintain a high level of service for 2019, for the 2019 level, and appreciate the feedback on going forward. And so with that adjustment to maintain the 2019 funding levels, I think that's important for us to make sure that we do that. I'll call the question on the motion. Okay, that was carried unanimously. Thank you very much for the comments. Moving forward, our other two items, our information items and our committee of the whole dates have been revised. And just on the slight revision to our committee of the whole meeting dates, we're going to be starting those two meetings at 5 o'clock for those listening for the next 2 months and then we'll see if there's any adjustments after that. So our committee of the whole will be starting next week at 5 p.m. So we don't have to deal with our information items. And I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. I appreciate the work of council. I appreciate the community spirit that we're trying to continue to work together to drive. And thank administration for a lot of hard work that went into preparing this summary and coming in at a tax rate and stuff that is going to help all of our citizens. So with that, we'll ask for one more motion.
I move to adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, moved by Councillor Acker to adjourn. With that, I'll call the question on the motion. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great evening and take care. Stay safe. Bye now.